Well, hello, and welcome to the final installment of Around the Taiwan Coast, Part 7. I would have to say is the boring bit of the trip, only because, and this is something that I think I've said a number of times throughout this series, the nicest part of Taiwan to do is the East Coast. That is for certain. The mountain views and just the stuff you can see is just fantastic. The West Coast can be a bit, a little bit boring. I've done it a number of times, and after a while I kind of enough of that. I really enjoy the East Coast. So one day I'm planning to do a trip which is only traveling the East Coast on completely different roads. Now, the night before I set off, I decided to, in my hotel, actually it was the afternoon before I left, to kind of give my final thoughts about it. So let's go to that now. I have traveled around Taiwan before. There's something that I talked about before that a lot of people will do here, which is to ride the complete circle of Taiwan in 24 hours. Basically, you're stopping for fuel and for very short breaks. Now, I've done that quite a few times now on different bikes, and always had a good time, except for once, which was a complete and utter disaster, which I talked about in a previous video. It wasn't the ride, and it wasn't how I was feeling. It was the bike itself. And I think anybody out there who's been riding motorcycles will know that every so often you'll come across a bike that will be exhausting. There's just too much vibration, too much noise, and everything. And yeah, it was just absolute rubbish, and just hated it. But if you're doing a pretty good bike, you can do the less than 24 hours, just stopping for fuel and maybe little 10-minute breaks to stretch your legs every 2 hours or so. It depends really on the individual. But this is the first time that I'm taking. Well, no, it's not 7 days. I should rephrase that. It's actually 8 days. So my next step now is actually heading back home to northern Taiwan. And that is riding on the West Coast. And I've ridden the West Coast many, many times. It's not as spectacular or as stunning from a visual standpoint, but it still nevertheless is very nice. So I'm going to leave early. My plan is to wake up at 3 in the morning and leave by 3:30. So tonight I will be going to bed a little bit earlier, about 3 hours earlier than normal. Do all my packing tonight, so then tomorrow I just have to, my clothes are there to get dressed and everything is ready. I can just out the door and that's it. Now, there's only one issue that I do have about traveling in Taiwan. If you like to do these kind of trips where sometimes maybe you're traveling at night or very, very early in the morning. In Taipei, where I live, finding a petrol station that's open 24 hours a day is very, very easy. Very, very easy. There's no problem at all. But in this area of Taiwan, which is the southern part and eastern Taiwan, where I was for a few days, it's a little bit more tricky. There are some that are open 24 hours a day. Well, a few. Maybe if 3 or 4. Most of the petrol stations on the eastern part of Taiwan and in the south open at 7 o'clock in the morning. Some of them close at 9 o'clock at night. Some of them close at 7. And there's a few that I passed by in the city of Hualien when I was going through Hualien a couple of days ago, that they open at 7 and they close at 5 p.m. So if you're going to be doing around Taiwan 24 hours, you kind of have to work out a schedule so at least you can arrive at these petrol stations on time. What I have been doing on this trip, so the first part was the northern tip of Taiwan, from Danshui to Yilan. And that isn't very far. I just filled up in Danshui and then got to Yilan. And I think I used maybe only 1/4 of a tank. But then the night before I left Yilan, because I knew that there wouldn't be any petrol stations open at 4:30 in the morning, I went and I filled up. And I've been kind of, what I like to do on these trips is when I stop to take a break, that's when I will fill my tank. Even if I don't really need to fill my tank, it's a little bit, I just feel a little bit more safe doing it in case, I mean, because there's some petrol stations that are listed on Google Maps that are gone, or they move to a different location. So it's just a bit of a precaution. So when I left Yilan going to Hualien, when I got to Hualien, I filled up my tank. Then from Hualien to Datong, the long distance, and I managed to get to Datong. Now, when I was looking at how much fuel I was using, I probably could have made it to Kaohsiung. But then I realized something. I mean, it's like any vehicle with a petrol engine. I mean, this is sort of like the big difference, let's say, between electric and a petrol-powered vehicle. An electric vehicle is very good with stop and start. And if you're in city traffic, for example, your stop, your start, the batteries actually could last a pretty long time. But if you take that same vehicle on an expressway or a highway where you're keeping a constant speed of, I don't know, maybe 100 or 120 kilometers an hour, the battery drains really, really fast. Unlike a petrol engine, which is the complete opposite. Petrol engines are not very good in stop and start, or where, for example, when the mountain road that I took to get to after where was it? On the way to Hualien, I passed through a mountain road that was actually closed off for some time from an earthquake that we had a few months ago. And you'll see, there was, you probably saw it already, but there's one point I had to wait almost an hour and a half because they were doing traffic control. And in those roads, I mean, I couldn't even go to sixth gear. I was in third gear and fourth gear most of the way. So, of course, the engine is revving higher, so you're using a lot more fuel. So just going through the mountain area, when I finally got down to the foot of the mountain, on the way to an Aboriginal village that I've stopped at before, I had to fill up the tank. I could probably have done the same distance on a freeway, a highway, or expressway, keeping the same speed, and I wouldn't have used much fuel. So if you're doing it like traveling around Taiwan, try to work out where the petrol stations are. That's always a good thing. Depending, of course, when you're traveling. I mean, if you're just doing short trips in the daytime, there's no problem. But a couple of times when I've done the Around Taiwan trip, I have come across people that were on not big bikes. So they were on scooters that have a pretty small tank of maybe 3.4 or 3.5 or 4 liter tanks. And I would come across these people and they would be stuck. People, you can do the trip. A lot of people do on scooters that are like 125cc, 150cc, and it's a lot of fun. But the tanks are smaller. And I have come across people on the side of the road waiting for a petrol station that there's right next to open, sometimes an hour or 2 hours, because they didn't time it right. Anyway, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this series around the Taiwan coast. Yes, I know some of the takes are very long, but I'm not one of these people that likes to chop things up and make it very snap and quick. I do like long form programs myself. I mean, I was actually thinking perhaps editing all this video into one big chunk that would be hours, and I might just do that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Like, comment, and subscribe. And there's some other videos that are coming up next week and the week after that I think you'll find interesting.